Hi Elaine, I hope this message finds you well. This is a video for the discussion of leading change by Kotter, and I will be discussing his 8 steps, and I will also periodically intertwine it, integrate it with things that I've seen within higher education, but also within the institution, and also within the field of within my field, which is the library and information science. To get directly to the point for this video, Kotter actually creates, or I should say outlines 8 steps for individuals within an organization to literally be successful at leading change. These steps which he outlines, which is creating a sense of urgency, to creating a guiding coalition. Step 3 is the development of a changing vision. Step 4, communicating that vision for buy-in. Step 5, broadening, or I should say empowering individuals, or empowering a broad-based support and implementing an action to create and sustain that vision. Step 6 is actually generating the short-term wins. Step 7, I think, is critical, which I don't think we do very well in, is don't let up, in the sense of keep the persistence going for leading the change. And step 8, make it stick. How do you keep something going, and while the end does not justify the means. So throughout the book, I noticed that Kotter actually will describe his 8 steps into and lumps them into 2 categories. He'll describe it as the first set of 4, and then the last set of 4. So he'll say, I noticed that he'll mention that individuals that are trying to be successful, and sometimes they may go easy or not fully in depth into the first 4, which creates problems when they're trying to implement or trying to move change through their organization. At times he'll actually say that there's a watered down across all the various steps along the way, but I notice he does oscillate between having 4 and 4. I actually, if I look at his 8 steps, I like to break it up into 3 distinctive categories, and then from there place his steps into those categories. So it would be 3, 3, and 2. So for instance, in step 1, 2, and 3, the increasing the urgency, building a teams, and creating a changing vision, I would label that as creating a change, creating a climate for change. So that would encapsulate sections 1, 2, and 3. For steps or sections, but steps 1, 3, 4, 5, and 6, where it's the communicating for the buy-in, enabling an action, and creating those short-term wins. I would say those fall into the engagement of and embedding it within the organization. And the last 2, which is don't let up and make it stick, that's what I would say falls into like maybe the implementing or sustaining the change. So he has listed 8, but I like to take the 8 and break it out into 3 sections. I think it's a little more manageable and easier for individuals to understand. Now within the 8, I'll just go through each one. What I've noticed is that when creating that sense of urgency, I like how he actually frames it in the sense that he describes that there is a need to have an urgency to break the complacency of individuals, and I unfortunately fall into that trapping of that complacency, where I sometimes will say, well, why do we need to make this change? Why do we need to embrace from a library standpoint, why do we need to embrace this new, let's say, a new system or platform? And I'll use, let's say, Second Life. Well, it's not out of complacency that I'm fearful of learning this new step or new environment of the online learning. It's more of the unsure of whether it will be used by others. So this is actually the decision. It's not that I don't want to embrace change. I look at it as there is a few individuals that have a desire within, let's say, the library field that will want to embrace or this concept of change, of embarking onto Second Life on a virtual reality. But in reality, we have not even explored everybody else's opinion or views on this. So it's a in essence, it's a top-down approach to trying to force many of my colleagues, or myself included, to embrace something that we are even unsure of. There's also at times, and this is where Kotter describes, creating a sense, a false sense of urgency. Because we may be complacent, or there is a sense of complacency, or maybe there's just unwillingness to participate in this change. I see it, that walk around my department and I see, or I hear people say, oh, I'm busy, or I got so much work to do. So at one point in time, I'm thinking, well, if you have so much work to do, why is it that you take an hour and a half lunch? I don't think we're that busy. But the problem is that we've created an environment, as Kotter would say, is that we become unproductive and we have unproductive results, and then eventually, which leads to this tendency of being burnt out within our professions, our jobs. So creating that sense of urgency is by leaders to literally not to underestimate how hard the people work, but also understand that they need to understand where are the comfort zones. And I think it's also not to overestimate how successful what we have done already, but also not to undermine the value of the work that has been previously done. So I think it's encouraging leaders to literally find where is it that fine line, that where can they push us, where can they motivate individuals to lead that change, that create a sense of that urgency. I also think that, and as Kotter points out, is that too many times, while there's a sense of creating this urgency, it's almost the urgency is too much. It doesn't have the potential to capture individuals and bring them along. It's more like, oh, we see the urgency, we hear what you're saying, but it doesn't affect us. It's not really, I think he describes it as not really a compelling rationale to motivate people to and I like how he focuses on the human element of trying to bring in a buy-in from at a personal level. And I think it is those individuals, those leaders that are willing to connect their values and to bring and lead change, which in essence motivates individuals not to just buy into the message, but also to buy into the individual as the leader, buy into that individual leader, and willing to move forward, willing to take the risk. I think of this in my organization, where there was one dean who, and I've had multiple deans in the past who I've worked with, that I can actually say I found truly motivating, and they would if they asked me to work extra hours, I would do it. If they asked me to work on a project, I would do it. But it's because I knew where they were coming from. I knew that they were coming from they had a moral center, and that moral center was big enough and it was strong enough to listen to our concerns and be respectful and mindful of the individual players, that we all felt connected in some form or another where we were willing to embrace a new idea or a new concept for change. Now, in step two is actually moves to the creating the guiding coalition. And Kotter describes this as putting groups together, empowering a group to move forward. And I think this is where I have to say at my institution we've done fairly well because of the shared governance. The institution prefers, the management prefers, or I should say administration, prefers that decisions are made from the bottom up. And at times, yes, there is a time when the president would like to push for an initiative. But for the most part, many of the decisions are coming from the bottom up, and they come from individuals from various departments across campus working together. We all have, those people that are in those committees have vested interest to actually do well, to put the students first. Now, the problem becomes, however, is that some committees are put together not because of there's an attempt to do well. It's required that we have to attend the meeting. So out of that meeting, when decisions are made, there's not a cohesive unit. We work together, but there's no cohesiveness at times. We may agree and we may want to go to lunch with some individuals, but we're not going to lunch with everybody. We're not seeing eye to eye. So I think, as Kotter notes, that in forming these committees that are to create the right vision and communicate for the vastness of the group or of the organization, and in this case the department or the college, and they're also meant to literally serve to eliminate the obstacles and generate those short-term wins. We hope that this committee can serve as an anchor to supporting a deep, lasting vision. I think the challenge, however, becomes, and the Kotter alludes to this notion, that it becomes problematic when we select individuals for committees, and in reality, they may not have they have all the best intentions, but they just cannot work well. So his argument is that we need to select individuals that not only have a respect for each other, but they have a respect for the vision or the initiative, and they are actually deeply trusted by the organization or the individuals around them, so that when they make a decision, we are comfortable that the decisions that they're making are in line with the mission of the organization or even with the core values that we believe in. And I think Kotter actually describes this guiding coalition should reflect, and he mentions there was four main points, and those points are the positions. Let me make sure I have this right. Wrong this page. He describes this as it's the positions of power. So these key players, as I mentioned, they're not blocked They're allowed to literally make decisions and move forward, and not having to worry about any of the obstacles, because the committee works together to eliminate those obstacles. They also have experience. They represent individuals that are well informed within the organization and willing to make literally wise or credible decisions. In regards to credibility, that's, I think, many times we select individuals because we think that they have the experience, but I can say I don't trust the individual. I don't trust how they think. Here's an example. We have a GI 2025 initiative by the Chancellor's Office. In essence, by 2025, all 23 campuses within the CSU have to increase their graduation rates and decrease the number of students lost or through attrition. Well, from a library standpoint, we tend not to actually look at or evaluate our successes or student success based on using a numeric value. but the president and the dean, the president and the provost really want this to happen. Okay, that's fine. So in an email recently sent out, actually within the last week and a half, there's been this word thrown around of granular data. How are we going to collect granular data? Well, today I looked at the recent email, and I think that was what broke the camel's back for me, is that the question would be is, these individuals that are talking, yeah, I respect where they're coming from, but the question would be is, I have to ask is, what's their definition of granular data? Because my definition from now with the having some experience in the knowledge of, and the background knowledge of that's been provided, I see granular data as literally a finite of information. Well, one individual provided granular data is looking at just, students' GPAs and their what do you call it? Not GPAs, their student IDs and also their email addresses. And I'm thinking, that's not granular data. That doesn't do anything. That doesn't lead me anywhere. So again, it's the credibility of the information. So I know that those people that are in positions that are credible would be able to think more in depth, and I allow them to make a decision because I put a lot more faith and stock into them. And the last point is the leadership, that they be given the ability to literally drive the changing process. In step 3, developing a vision. I think the big issue in step 3 is literally being able to clarify the future and how it's different from the past decision making or the past project. And I think within that clear vision, things have to. He hammered away. Kotter literally mentioned it has to be simple. Simplification for in the decision making process. I'm telling you now, we're going through a revamping of the catalog system, or what they call there's an interface. There's 2 programs, one for the front of the house, which patrons will see, and the back, which the catalogers will see. And I can say confidently that there is not a clear vision. We are stumbling like blind individuals in the woods in the dark, trying to find the light, and it's really disconcerting because it's not clear. The motivations that people are taking, there are multiple people, and while it is going to be a painful process, I'm fearful that some individuals, which I'm seeing, are not willing to share the burden of pain, and so I see that it's going to take longer to implement. And I think the third was also the coordinating actions of different people. Well, I've recently found out that this decision-making process to embrace this new model of the interface is handed down by the Chancellor's office. So it's being forced, and some decisions were just by decree. So I also, whether that's good or bad, I know that within an organization as large as ours or mine, we do need that hierarchical approach. But I think if they kick-started it, now the question is I don't think they're doing a good enough job of pushing forward for that vision. But for those individuals like at the lower levels, working together, trying to make it happen is another story. There is progress. So I think the issue with creating that vision is that you have to create a clear picture on what it would look like. I think we talk about this is what we're designing, this is what we're developing, but we don't talk about what the end result would look like. How is it going to help? How is it going to be? We don't get there. There's a desire. The desirability is, how do we make this appealing for the long-term interest so that we have multiple people working on it, trying to make it happen. But what is at what cost? Are we doing it because it's in your job description, or there's no love in it? It's just, this is what we got to do, and people groan about it and complain. And also the feasibility. It's being realistic. I think sometimes we are and sometimes we're not. Sometimes we create these realistic that we're going to do this in, let's say, a year. But then we sometimes say, we're going to do this in 6 months, but on top of doing this project, you're also going to have to do your own job. And then it goes back to the burnout issue. And then also being focused, being clear enough to provide guidance in the decision-making process. But this becomes challenging when I see the constant emails that say, well, we've actually revised the guiding structure that will define how we're going to approach this topic, or the decision-making tree may change slightly. It becomes disconcerting. Also, being feasible or flexible on how to accept change even when the landscape changes. And so I think for pushing forward a vision, it does need to be mindful of that change. And also needs to be easily communicated. That's a big one. And this is where we see it in, you see it in step 4. Kotter, if you didn't get anything out of this book, it has to be that Kotter was hammering away in communicating a vision or a buy-in, that he stresses that ensuring that people understand what that vision is and to accept it, and make it as simple as possible. He describes about companies that fail because they tend to issue a single memo or a speech and then say, this is our direction and we're going to go with it, but never follow up. He really tries to talk about the need for keeping it simple. Don't be technical. You may need to be the mumbo jumbo. Just get to the point. Tell them what you're trying to achieve, and provide a picture. And I think this is where many individuals fail, is because they don't provide or use the metaphors, analogies, or provide examples in describing what they're trying to do. And then it's being able to repeat it to everyone. It's not just one time, it's the continuous message of what you're trying to do. And also, here's the key as well, having a two-way communication. Just presenting the information and walking away and saying, we're going to do it, doesn't help. It's having that open dialogue. And that way it creates a willingness to participate, a willingness to literally have some skin in the game. And he does talk about this need to actually not just talk the talk, but walk the walk. I think that leaders need to literally inspire a vision, and in doing so, they must lead. They must lead by their actions, and I think my personal experience, those individuals that have done that I will walk it through fire for them. I will do whatever is possible that to make something happen for them. But it's when I don't see them and they say, well, this is what I think you should do, or maybe we should go down the way, and I don't see them willing to pick up the shovel and help, then I have no interest. I have no desire. I hate to say that, but it's this is where it goes back to not only the complacency, but it also goes back to under a mind where individuals don't want to participate, and they have their own self-interest in mind, and could undermine that vision. Step 5 empowers a broad-based action. Leaders have to remove as many barriers as possible to unleashing the full potential of the individual. And I think this is where I think at times management, and it's interesting, management who are managers are trying to manage, but they don't, they become stuck on the process of the little things that we shouldn't really concern ourselves. I think it's they criticize the decision-making processes. They may have issues with the cost. They don't see that the cost, well, you may be spending some money up front, it'll be beneficial in the long run. I think we create the barriers ourselves many times, which actually hinders our ability to lead change. Then, of course, the supervisors. It never fails to amaze me that I know it was the 1980s and the 90s that we created, and even probably the 70s. We had these executive management teams and organizations, even from within schools, to crank out modern managers. And really, I understood why, because the complexity of the work environment, but they didn't create them for leaders. So we see that now as how do we develop leaders, and I see this in my organization, where you'll have individuals that are now emerging, younger ones that are willing to lead, take the initiative. But then you have the others that are willing to not rock the boat, stay in the confined space, and it's follow that saying of it's always been done, we're going to follow that, and not willing to take too much of a risk. And I think I'm willing to throw a lot of it out just to take the risk, to push the envelope. And I know that sometimes I do get in the causes some trouble, but it's necessary to be that vocal. I think at times be so vocal to push individuals so far that we get them to nudge just a little bit forward, and you need to have that pull to a little get them to be move one step and to get that change enacted. In step 6, Kotter talks about the generating of short-term wins. We don't do this. We have zero acceptance of creating short-term wins. Kotter, I like how he describes it, where you keep those, provide the short-term wins, and so you can actually encourage people to participate and see the value as they move forward from one step to another. We don't. I know that. We told to create a project, and you're working. There's no, like, okay, and then it's done. Well, that's not what the 8 steps are all about. So the very essence that Kotter, what he lays out and his experience, we are not even looking at it. We're just like, well, here's it. Here we work on a project and we're going to finish it. Well, I can see that without these short-term, check-ins or wins, as he calls them, people become discouraged. People become disillusioned, I think, of understanding where they're going, the trajectory, and they just start marching. And then step 7, he describes the don't let up. And I think this is where he mentions where individual organizations fail is because they literally get to a point and it takes time, and then things start to fizzle out. We're like, okay, I'll think of my setup. We talked about having tracking students and using clickers to get them become more engaged. So we bought these clickers, and it was a big hurrah, and we put it in the classroom, and then we just figured out that you needed line of sight, and that became a problem. But we had the clickers, and it died. We spent $500, and that's a lot of money for the clickers, but $500 on a product that we used twice, found out the problem because of the line of sight, and we never touched it again. And what happened? We threw them in the trash after 2 years. They were sitting in a room after a month. So I think we should have gone back and revisited that issue and talked about it, and why did it fail? Why did we not catch it? Looked at the individuals and asked, why did you select it? And this is where I think the acceptance of responsibility is key. You have to accept responsibility. And those individuals that don't accept responsibility are prone to making mistakes again. And what do? We take those individuals and throw them back into the process of making decisions. And that goes back to the question of step number, I think it was step number, not 3. Step number 2 in creating, as Kotter describes, is creating that guiding coalition. Fails. And then, so we have number 6 is creating the short term, and number 7 is don't let up. Excuse me. But in number 8, making it stick. The key, and this just goes back to how do you keep people going? It's cultivating a change that comes, that he argues it doesn't come, it comes comes last, not first. And I think this is where I see some people, we want to cultivate the change and we talk about it and we're going to try and move it. And we're like, no, 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 no. It needs to be sustained. How do you sustain it? So the question would be is reevaluate what you're working on, how to improve it. So if I took the clicker situation, we could have continued to make this change. We could have continued to develop. And of course, we're going to lose, as he mentions, we're going to lose people in the process. But as new people come in, we reinforce this culture of re-examining, rethinking of the way what we've done in the past and how we can change it into the future. So, in a nutshell, after reading Kotter, I have to say that it was a simple read. It's definitely meant for. Actually, I would have a requirement for anybody that wants to lead change within an organization or anyone in an organization. Even if you're not thinking about leading change, it would help an individual. I found it easy to read, easy to follow. Out of the book, there was actually 2 quotes that I truly enjoyed. One was actually talking about, looking at in chapter 6 on page 88. He's talking about the vision creation, and I quote, "We undercommunicate because we cannot figure out a particular alternative." And I think this is the challenge, is that we do not understand, if we're not understanding what we're trying to do in creating change, we do ourselves a disservice because we are unable to communicate it very well. Also, in chapter 6, he says, keeping it simple. He mentions that there is communication seems to work best when it is so direct and so simple that it has some sort of elegance. And I think that truly, I like that sentence because he's right. I have colleagues that are eloquent. They'll go around the room and summarize various points. But at times you sit there and you're going, I don't understand what he's trying to say, because he sometimes will use these massive, grandiose words, and we have the word as pompous for him. But it gets to the point where, okay, you really need to check your ego at the door, because we're tired of you, cleaning and preening yourself with. So I think there is these 2 sentences, or I should say quotes, are actually enjoyable from my standpoint because they truly represent what I see, and I just, especially the one with the being elegant. I think we sometimes underestimate that sometimes the simplest message is the best message. Keep it simple. Well, this is a review of Leading Change, and today is, I'll make sure I read the right date, it's February 22nd, 2017. I hope this message finds you well, and as I lose the iPad, I apologize for Richard Nixon, Obama, and President Obama and President George Bush in the background. I haven't taken down the posters. I normally, for the election, I get students motivated and I want to put up something, but I do have the current president. I have yet to figure if I want to put him up on the room until maybe in 4 years, but we'll see. I haven't decided. Now that's changed too. I hope this message finds you well. Take care.